أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Respected brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Previously, we examined the traditions that clearly state the Khums has been lifted from the Shia during certain periods, specifically during the time of the occultation, al-ghayba. We examined the relationship between these hadiths and those hadiths that clearly state that Khums is wajib, it's an obligation. One important point that we highlighted is that a lot of these hadiths which state that the Khums has been lifted from the Shia, they give us the reasoning behind that. لِتَطِيبَ وِلَادَتُهُمْ, so that the birth of the Shia can be legitimate. And we examined how could that be applicable. In what scenario, in what case would Khums have an impact on the legitimacy of the children? And we mentioned basically the situation with those wars that would happen at the time. They would bring these slave girls, people would buy them from the slave market, 20% of them would not be owned, they would be owned by the Imams and the recipients of Khums, and that's where the problem would arise. So this is one way of examining the apparent contradiction between these two hadiths and resolving it. Any questions about that before we examine the second way to resolve the contradiction? Yes, brother.
I remember taking notes, and he mentioned that there are three categories, probably regarding...
Three categories. Yeah. So the first category says Khums is wajib. Second category says it has been lifted. The third category is the second method that I'll discuss right now. So the third category of hadiths are those hadiths which explain what is it that the Imams have lifted. Sometimes you might have a general statement that something is legal, it's permissible. Then you have a contradictory statement that something is not permissible. Now apparently they contradict one another. Then you have a third statement that clarifies exactly what is being permitted and what's not being permitted. By taking this third category, we can basically reconcile the discrepancy or the contradiction between the hadiths. Let's give some very basic examples. Let's say there's a hadith that says, do not eat cheese. We do have such hadiths. And then, so what's the apparent meaning of this hadith? Do not eat cheese. What's the apparent meaning of it? It's prohibited. It's haram, for instance, or highly discouraged. Then you have another hadith that says, no, it's okay to eat cheese. لا بأس بأكل الجبن. It's okay to eat cheese. Now there is an apparent contradiction here. Don't eat cheese, it's okay to eat cheese. Which is it? A third hadith comes and says, do not eat cheese by itself. Eat it with walnuts. Because that negative side effect of cheese is addressed by eating walnuts, for instance. You see, this third category of hadith addresses the apparent contradiction here. It tells us the hadith that said don't eat cheese, what does it exactly mean? It means don't eat cheese by itself. But if you eat it with other foods, it's fine, like walnuts or almonds, it's okay. See how it resolves the contradiction? Or we have hadith that state don't eat cheese. Then we have another hadith that states in the morning don't eat cheese, which we do the exact opposite, right? It's makruh in the morning to eat cheese. It kind of weakens your intellectual capacity. It has some effect on the mind, on the brain. The hadith says eat it at night. You love eating cheese? Eat it at night. A few hours, a couple of hours before you sleep. It's better. It helps you rest. calms the body down, you'll have a better sleep. So we have this hadith that clarifies. So you see this third category of hadith, we can call it as a clarifier. It resolves the contradiction by shedding light on both hadiths. The one that said no, why is it saying no? And the one that said yes, in what context was it saying yes? That's the overall idea. Let's now apply it here. We have a hadith that says khums has been lifted. Another hadith that says khums is wajib. A third category of hadith, which we mentioned last week briefly, tells us that you Shia, when you deal with other people who don't believe in the system of khums, you do transactions with them, you buy and sell, and you're concerned that 20% of that is not yours. That 20% in these transactions has been lifted from you, O Shia. You're not liable for it. Let me share with you a couple of hadiths here. This hadith is a muwaththaq hadith. It's a reliable hadith from Yunus ibn Yaqub, one of the companions of Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam. He says, كنت عند أبي عبد الله عليه السلام فدخل عليه رجل. I was with the Imam alayhi salam when a man who was a businessman came to see the Imam. فقال جعلت فداك تقع في أيدينا الأموال والأرباح وتجارات نعلم أن حقك فيها ثابت وإنا عن ذلك مقصرون. He says some money falls in our hands through business, through trading, and we know that you have a right in this money. You own the khums of it. I go in the market, I buy something. Let's say you buy a mode of transportation. You buy a piece of cloth, fabric. Well, when you buy that fabric, 20% of that fabric technically was not owned by the buyer, because the buyer does not believe in khums and that you have to pay any khums. We know you have a right in all this merchandise and all these transactions. And we have fallen short in guaranteeing that 20% for you, in guaranteeing that haqq. So what do? فقال أبو عبد الله عليه السلام ما أنصفناكم إن كلفناكم ذلك اليوم. The Imam said it would be unfair, too burdensome for us, the Imams of Ahlul Bayt, to demand that from you, the Shia. Yes, the money that you make, the profit that you make, you have to pay the khums, no doubt about that. Other hadiths are very clear. But the money you're getting from other people, the merchandise you're getting from other people, the property you buy from other people, yes, 20% of it does not belong to those people because they don't pay the khums. They don't observe the right of the Ahlul Bayt and the recipients of khums. We've lifted that from you. So this lifting of khums, according to this third category, is it a general lifting or a specific restricted lifting? What type of tahleel is it? What type of lifting of khums? It's specific. Specific to what scenario? To what case?
If you're buying merchandise, it's not paid, khums paid.
Exactly. Something gets in your hands from others who don't believe in khums. They don't see that there's a right in their property, but you know 20% of it is not theirs. That 20% has been lifted from you. The Imam says, you know that person doesn't pay their khums. They sold you something. 20% does not belong to them, but it's okay. You don't have to bring this 20% to us. That would be too burdensome on you, O Shia. So the lifting here, the tahleel here is khas, it's specific. This third category of hadith basically resolves the contradiction between the two. So all those hadiths that we talked about, the Imams have lifted the khums, lifted the khums, lifted the khums. What scenario are they examining? This particular scenario. A second example, we have a hadith from Abi Salama, Salim ibn Mukarram, and his kunya, his title was Abu Khadija, عن أبي عبد الله عليه السلام, from Imam الصادق عليه السلام. قال له رجل وأنا حاضر حلل لي الفروج ففزع أبو عبد الله عليه السلام. A man came to Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, Abu Khadija is narrating, That man said to the Imam alayhi salam something which was shocking, which the Imam alayhi salam showed a strong reaction to. He told him, حَلِّلْ لِيَ الْفُرُوجِ, basically, make women lawful for me. Now, it's an Arabic expression. He literally said, make the private parts lawful for me, which means make women lawful for me. So Imam alayhi salam, he showed a very strong reaction. فَقَالَ لَهُ, he said to him, لَيْسَ يَسْأَلُكَ أَنْ يَعْتَرِضَ الطَّرِيقِ. He's not asking you to give him fatwa permission for him to go and harass a woman and rape her or claim her as his lawful woman. No, that's not what he means. So what did he mean by saying that? إِنَّمَا يَسْأَلُكَ خَادِبًا يَشْتَرِيهَا أو امرأة يتزوجها أو ميراثا يصيبه أو تجارة أو شيئا أعطاه. He's asking you that if he, for instance, buys a maid, right? It was common in the past for him to go to the slave market and buy a slave girl, a maid. When he buys her, 20% does not belong to him. So basically, this woman is not lawful to him. She's haram to him because he doesn't fully own the right to be with her. 20% of it belongs to the Imam and the recipients of Khums. So he tells him, give me the haliyah, the permissibility, so I can do that. Or I can marry a woman and pay her the dowry, the mahar. And the mahar would be, for instance, lawful because I get money from all sorts of people and they don't observe the Khums. You see what this man had in mind? The Imam alayhi salam states, هَذَا لِشِيعَتِنَا halal. We've made this halal for our Shia. الشاهد منهم والغائب. Those who are present at that time and those who will come in different generations. وَالْمَيِّتْ مِنْهُمْ وَالْحَيِّ. The dead and the alive. وَمَا يُولَدْ مِنْهُمْ إِلَىٰ يَوْمِ الْقِيَامَةِ. And all the Shias that will be born till the day of judgment. We've made this halal. See the statement that the Imam making this halal is exactly the scenario that those hadiths have made halal that we discussed in our previous class. So this third category is shedding light on what's being halal, what's being made halal. You go to the market, you buy something, you know that the Imam has a right in it. So you're concerned about that. The Imam says, it's okay, you're off the hook. Any question about this third category of hadiths? Yes.
So, I'm confused. So people buy something at a store, and like Walmart, you pay Khums on it.
Exactly.
I don't have to pay Khums on it?
You go and buy, let's say, something from Walmart, right? 20% of what you're buying from Walmart technically does not belong to you or Walmart. It belongs to who? Technically, originally in Islamic law, who does it belong to? The Imam and the recipients of Khums. Okay, so now that you bought this thing from Walmart, this product, can you use it? Because 20% of it is not yours. How can you lawfully use it? Whether it's food, whether it's clothes, whether it's anything. Technically, initially you cannot. According to Islamic law, you can't use it because you don't own 20% of it, right? Now imagine if life was that way. You couldn't use it. So the Imam says, okay, I relinquish my right and I lift the burden of the Khums from this category. But your own income that you make and the profits that you make at the end of the year after accounting for all expenses, no, that's a different story. That you have to pay Khums on. So this is the third category of hadiths that we have, which explains what is being lifted. Is that clear? Any questions on this third category of hadiths? Or is it clear? Do you have any objections to the way the scholars have basically examined all these hadiths? Because I'll be very honest with you, today there's a lot of misconceptions. There are strong voices out there in society stating that Khums has been lifted. It's these maraja and scholars who are inventing this Khums system. The Imam made it halal, the scholars making it wajib. This is growing. So if you're not convinced, if you find the way scholars have examined these hadiths problematic, let's discuss it. I am open to that. So we examine three categories of hadiths. One that says Khums is wajib, and the Imams were strict about it. One that says Khums has been lifted. Number three, these specific hadiths which explain what is being lifted. And remember the point that we mentioned last time. Many of those hadiths that talk about the khums being lifted, they give us the reasoning behind it, the logic behind it, so that the birth of the Shia would be legitimate. And we examined what that has to do with khums. So this is basically the summary of the discussion that scholars are examining. Do you find this objectionable? Is this acceptable? Do you have any other perspective about it? Yes, I'll get to you. Yes, brother.
I just feel that the second and third categories, they kind of similar. Because
They are similar, but remember, those hadiths that state khums has been lifted, they're more general in their tone. So someone could get the impression that the Imam is completely lifting khums. What's special about this category that we just discussed, the third category, it tells us specifically what's being lifted. What kind of right is being lifted here? That's what's unique about this. So yeah, it is similar to those other categories, but the scope of it is more limited. And when you have a limited scope, it tells you that general statement, what did it mean? Like the example that we gave about cheese, right? Yes, brother.
The Sunni school of thought, they don't believe in khums, right? And how would they arrive to that?
No, they do believe in khums. We examined that last year. They just believe, they have a different perspective on the scope of khums. So they believe in war spoils, in treasures found under the ground. In certain categories, they do believe in the khums. But they believe that the income that you make and the surplus that you have, yeah, that's not applicable to khums. So this is where we disagree. Otherwise, they believe in khums.
But what's their basis on that?
What's their basis for rejecting that?
Yeah.
Well, we examined that last year. This type of khums was pretty much clarified and explained by later Imams. During the time of the Prophet ﷺ, there were certain reasons why the Prophet may not have fully demanded the Muslims to pay this type of khums. And hence, they don't recognize, of course, the authority of later Imams, so that's why they don't have it. And we examined what those reasons are. Why the Prophet, he wasn't aggressive with collecting that type of khums. Yes, brother.
I missed the first part of the discussion, but you said that anything we buy from Walmart or any store, we have to pay khums on it?
Originally, yes. Before the Tahleel al-Khums, yes.
Where is that in the Quran?
Because 20,
The Quran says, وَمَا غَنِمْتُم مِّن شَيْءٍ.
yeah, anything you gain, 20% of it belongs to who? These 6 categories: Allah, the Prophet, the Imams, the Yatim, the Miskeen, the Ibn Sabil. When you buy something, when you get something from Walmart, is that a gain or no? The money that you used to buy, is that a gain or no? See, Walmart gained that product. Okay? It was a gain for them, the owner of Walmart. They're selling you, let's say you're buying a shirt from Walmart. That shirt, was it a gain for Walmart when they owned it? Was it a ghanima for the owner of Walmart? Or no?
It's a gain, I'm not sure it's a gain. It's a
Did they benefit by acquiring that? Or the money they had to buy that shirt? Was it a gain for them one day? Of course it was. They might lose, of course, generally speaking, but that merchandise that's in their hands right now is a gain. Something they did not have one day and then they got it, they acquired it. The fact that it's a gain means 20% of it had to be given to the recipients of khums. So when Walmart is selling you that piece of cloth, that shirt, they technically don't own all of it. They only own 80% of it. Now you get this from Walmart. What happens to that 20%? Originally, technically you should give it to the recipients of khums. But the Imam says in this hadith, this is too difficult for the Shia to observe, so I've lifted that. So all these hadiths that talk about khums being lifted, they're examining this category. It's this specific situation they're talking about. Where someone doesn't believe in the system of khums, they don't observe that right, you get something from them, yes, the Imam says it's okay. You don't have to pay that khums, you don't have to pay. So it's not a general lifting of khums where all khums is lifted. It's a particular type of lifting. Tahleel khas, walaysa tahleelan amman. That's the idea here. Any other objections to this way that the scholars have gathered these hadiths?
Just one other thing, like let's say you're saying I bought a shirt from Walmart and I don't wear it that whole year, and the year passes by, but I still have to pay khums on it, right?
Yes, of course. If you buy anything, you don't wear it, you don't use it for a full year, or until your khums year comes, you have to pay khums on it, absolutely. On that day of your khums year, you estimate the market value of that shirt. If it's a second-hand shirt, obviously the value of it is much less. You estimate it and you pay the 20% of its value. Yes?
Do you mean the shirt, let's say, if it has never been worn?
Yes. Or you did wear it once and then a full year passed and you did not use it. So it's no longer an expense for that year if a full year passed and you did not use it. Therefore, in that case, you would have to pay the khums of its value. We have two scenarios here. One, you buy a shirt, right? You buy shoes, you buy a pair of shoes, or you buy a shirt. You never touch it, you never wear it, not for any occasion. Just stays in your closet. Your khums deadline comes, your khums year comes. You have to pay the khums of that shirt. Why? Because you never used it, so it's not an expense. It's not an expense for that particular year. Okay, the second scenario, you did buy that shirt, you wore it once. Then you throw it in your closet. For a full year, you did not use it. Because you did not use it for a full year, technically it did not become an expense for that year, so you have to pay the khums of it.
Is this a new fatwa? We never discussed this last year.
We talked about this in detail.
Not the second scenario, the first one, yes.
Oh, you definitely did. My mom came home and was like, you need to pay hummus on all of these.
We can discuss the details of that. Yes, we did discuss that last year. If I bought something not with mkhammas money, if it's mkhammas money, we don't have a problem with that. You've already paid the khums. It has to be an expense in order for you not to pay khums on it. It has to be an expense. Well, how does it become an expense? You have to wear it in that year. If 1 year passes, I own something which I never paid khums on, and I never used it, it's not my expense. So I have to pay khums on it because it's not a ma'una, it's not an expense. Why would I not pay khums on it?
You already wore it once.
Yeah, that was for that year, not the new year. I wore it last year, so last year I didn't have to pay khums because it was an expense. But this new year, I also have to wear it again in order for it to be considered an expense, so I don't have to pay khums on it. But if a full year passes in the new year, and I don't wear it, I don't use it, it's not an expense. So I own something that's not an expense, and I've never paid khums on. I have to pay khums on it. See, all the laws of khums are applicable here. Why do you want to exclude it? What would exclude it from that? Because the only thing that we have that excludes something, makes it khums exempt, is the ma'una, an expense. Last year this was an expense, not this year. Do you say this year this is one of my expenses? I tell you, you didn't touch it this year. How is that an expense this year? You never used it. How is that an expense? If it is not an expense, you pay khums on it. So yes, anything you own, if a full year passes on it and you don't use it, not even once, you are liable to pay khums on it. If you have pairs of shoes, I know this is something sisters struggle with. A full year passes, you never paid khums, you never used it, it's not an expense, so you pay the khums of its current value and estimate what the value is.
So when you mean current value, but usually like we donate clothes, which is like we don't put it in any value because no one.
If you donated that year, you don't have to pay khums on it, it's no longer yours. Okay.
The value of it is a donation, like no one's gonna buy it, so technically it has no value.
Well, we did discuss this last year. It does have a value, but it's a lot less. Let's say the market value of it may be $10, right? You could sell it maybe for $10. Or it does have some market value. It's not zero. I'm sure if you were to sell it somewhere, there are people who you could. How much can you sell it on eBay? If you wanted to. 5 cents? Obviously not. Let's say you bought a pair of shoes that's worth $100. And it's pretty new or in perfect condition, right? Now if you wanted to sell it on eBay, can you sell it for $20?
I can make a living off of everything that I have right now.
So can you sell it for $20 as an example? That's the market value of it. You have to estimate how much can you possibly sell it for.
And is this like all Maraja Sayyid?
Yes, all Maraja are in agreement about that. Now, let's say if the market value of it is $20, so what's 20% of that? $4. $4. You pay $4 as khums for those pairs, for that pair of shoes. In our example. Yes.
Not to get picky, but how long, what constitutes, how much time do you have to wear something for?
There is no set time. It just has to be considered an expense. If you're just trying it on in front of the mirror, that's not an expense. That's not an expense. It has to be a legitimate expense. Or let's say someday the brother comes out, he takes out his suit, and he's sitting at the dinner table with his family with a suit. Habibi, what are you doing today? I'm using the suit so I don't pay khums on it. That's not legitimate. We discussed this last year. Why? Because that's not a real that's not a real usage. That's a superficial usage. Yes, if there was a wedding, there was a program, and you used it for that, people say, okay, the guy used his suit at this program. That's fine. That's a valid usage. But for you just to wear it in your home so you can evade khums, that doesn't work. Yes, brother.
But that law is not applicable for anybody that already paid khums before he.
Yeah, we mentioned that, of course. If you've already paid the khums before, that does not apply.
Just,
Yes.
the woman has a wedding dress, so she bought it for, let's say, $5,000. And after 10 years, she's going to wear it. What she has to do, she has to pay khums.
Yes, she has to pay the khums of it, of course.
For every
For
year,
10
not just
times,
once.
because 10 years passes by.
No, not 10 times, just once. You pay the khums on it and that's it. And then you can keep it for 20 years. Yeah, if the value of it goes higher, so you make a new gain, which is unlikely, because with clothes, it's very rare that their value goes up, right? So if you pay the khums once on it, that's it. You paid the khums on it. Yeah, you paid the khums on it, you could keep it for another 50 years, no problem. But the question was, you never paid khums on it. You used it the first year in your wedding, you used it, so as an expense you didn't have to pay khums on it. But the second year, a full year passed, you never used it. Yeah, so the sisters have to, with their wedding dress, after the wedding, if there's no usage of it, even if friends borrowing it or whatever it is, you have to pay khums on it, sure.
But she wore it on her wedding.
Yeah, so that year of the wedding, she doesn't have to pay khums on it because it was an expense. But this new year, you own a $5,000 dress. So let's say your wedding was 2018. Fine, in 2018 you use this dress, you don't have to pay khums on the value of it. In 2019, did you use that dress? No, so you have to pay khums on it.
Sayyid, I feel like I would go crazy if I had to think about every single item. I feel like the easiest thing to do at the end of the year, just give extra hummus, because that's what I usually do. And
You can do that just to be confident.
Yeah.
But remember, one of the brothers mentioned something very important last year. This whole system of calculating for the khums makes us responsible. A lot of times we don't know what we buy, what we spend, what's necessary, what's not necessary. At least khums makes you conscious of your spending. So it just encourages you to keep a record of what you're buying, what you're using, because you will realize that a lot of the things you're using are a waste. Are a waste. And do we really want to be wasteful in our spending? So there's a good side to it, actually. One final point about this discussion. Let's say we could not come to a conclusion about these conflicting narrations. That one hadith says khums is wajib, one hadith says khums is lifted. We could not figure out how to resolve the contradiction. What happens? Those of you who remember legal theory, what do we do in this case? We have two contradictory hadiths. Let's say we could not figure out a way to reconcile between them. What happens? Yes. Right. So both of them are no longer applicable. Ta'arada, tasaqata. So if both narrations are no longer applicable, what do we do? What's the next step? Before we go to any law, we have a verse in the Quran. We go back to the verse of khums. Those hadiths that state khums is wajib in this particular situation, the imams were strict. Okay, that hadith, it's no longer applicable because of the contradiction. And the hadith that says khums has been lifted, it's no longer applicable. So we don't have any hadith to clarify. We go back to the general statement in the Quran, which says khums is mandatory. So what's the result here? You have to pay khums. Any questions?
We pay taxes here, why do we have to pay homes?
Taxes are part of your expenses. If you pay $2,000 in taxes this year, khums is not applicable on the taxes. Consider that as an expense. What's left over after taxes is what you have to pay khums on.
Also, you can get a tax deduction for your khums if you pay it to the mosque.
Yes, if you pay it to a non-profit organization, yes, you can also get a write-off for it too.
Some,
No, it should be a special ruling for people who pay taxes. Homes ones. Like we pay tax, we do deduction taxes. Different countries, they don't pay tax. So it's not fair for all.
No, each country has its own tax laws. There is no country that does not charge taxes, believe me. Not on planet Earth.
you're, no, well, you have to go by where you live. I mean, if the law tells you have to pay taxes, you have to pay taxes. Nothing you can do about it. But in respect to what she said, let's say you have khums to pay is $5,000, and then you write it off on your taxes. Technically, didn't you just save yourself some money on your tax expense? Don't you know you have to pay khums on the savings of what you did? Because I have.
If it is a profit at the end of the year, then yes.
So, because the reason why I say this is because I have a family member that doesn't put his khums on his taxes. The reason why is because now he paid his khums, but then now for the next year his expenses will be higher as deductible for his tax bill. So now he has to pay that 20% of the savings that he paid in taxes. So he chooses not to put it.
Not if you
But
do it.
my question is not the logic of the taxes, but the khums. So this year I have to pay 5,000, right?
Let's say that's your khums is 5,000. Okay.
5,000, okay? So I put in my taxes as a not-for-profit or donation. But then I get a tax savings on that year. That means.
So that reduces from your expenses then,
Expenses.
right?
So, but don't you have to pay khums on the savings I just did, or no?
Yes, you do. If it's for that current year, yes, you do.
You do, right?
Because now you thought your expenses were, let's say, $30,000 this year.
In taxes.
After doing that, you discovered, no, in fact, my expenses were less than that because I got it.
So the difference, you have to pay the.
You have to pay that difference. The khums on that difference, yes,
Yeah.
yes. That is the
I just
case.
want to mention.
Yes.
that, yeah.
That is the case. Now with that, we conclude the discussion on the tahleel of khums. The next discussion is on page 122 of our book. If you don't have the book, you can see us later and get a copy of the book. Masraf al-khums. We've talked about the khums, the laws of khums, the details surrounding it. How is this khums spent? قال الإمام الصادق عليه السلام, in one hadith that the author mentions, in examining this verse, the khums verse, which we examined last year, وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّ مَا غَنِمْتُم مِّن شَيْءٍ, know that everything you gain, you have to give 20% of it to these 6 categories. The Quran mentions 6 categories. فَأَنَّ لِلَّهِ خُمُسَ. 1 share belongs to Allah, 1 out of 6. وَلِلرَّسُولِ, number 2, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he has a share. وَلِذِي الْقُرْبَى, the kin, the relatives of the Prophet. Who are the relatives of the Prophet according to our school of thought? The Ahlul Bayt, peace be upon them. And then we also have hadiths that tell us exactly who they are. That's the 3rd share. The 4th one, وَالْيَتَامَى, the orphans. The 5th share, وَالْمَسَاكِينَ, those who are poor. The 6th and the last one, وَابْنِ السَّبِيلِ, the wayfarer, the one who goes to another town, he's traveling, he loses his money or he runs out of money. The Imam alayhi salam clearly examines who these are. The first 3 is for Allah, the Prophet, and the Imam. Then we have the 3 other categories. وَالْيَتَامَى, the Imam says these aren't just any orphans, the orphans who come from the family of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The masakeen, the poor who come from the family of the Prophet, and the Ibn Sabil who comes from the family of the Prophet. So the Imam makes it very clear that these categories have to be from the family of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now the first 3, God's share, the Prophet's share and the Imam's share, what do we call it? Sahmil Imam, the Imam's share. Why do we call it the Imam's share when you have God's share and the Prophet's share? Why? Because the Imam inherits those two shares. During the time of the Prophet, who would be authorized to spend Allah's share? The Prophet himself, because he represents God. After the Prophet, who represented him in that regard? The Imam alayhi salam. So that's why we call it the Imam's share. It's basically a combination of these three shares: God, the Prophet, and the Imam. Then we have these last three shares: the orphan, the poor, and Ibn Sabil. We call this Sahmil Sada, the Sayyid's share. Why is it called the Sayyid's share? Because they are from the family of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So let's examine this in some detail.
So it's 50-50, so between
Yes. So 50% of it is the Imam's share, 50% of it is for the Sayyids. Now why is it, if you remember from last year, why is it that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, why did He give the Prophet's family this share? To compensate for what? For the zakat. Because the zakat, the mandatory charity, the Prophet's family is denied from taking it. Why? In honor of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah did not want the relatives of the Prophet or the progeny of the Prophet, to go there and beg for the charity or to be given the zakat, the wajib charity. Allah wanted to honor the Prophet, so He honored his progeny. Allah made it haram for any Sayyid to take any zakat money. So how do you compensate that? Because there are people from the Prophet's family who are poor or who might struggle financially. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives them Sahm al-Sada, the share of the Sayyids. That's how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala compensates them. So we have a hadith from Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, the author mentions it on page 123, in which he clearly examines that. إِنَّمَا جَعَلَ اللَّهُ هَذَا الْخُمْسِ لَهُمْ. Allah has made khums only for the Sayyids. Why? دُونَ مَسَاكِينِ النَّاسِ وَأَبْنَاءِ سَبِيلِهِمْ عِوَضًا لَهُمْ مِنْ صَدَقَاتِ النَّاسِ. To compensate them, because they are not allowed to take wajib sadaqah, to take zakat. And then he examines that this is a way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala honors the Prophet with. Now who are the family of the Prophet? The Imam alayhi salam mentions Banu Abdul Muttalib, the progeny of Abdul Muttalib. Men and women, they deserve this share. Now the Imam also makes it clear that this ancestry in determining khums is a paternal system, not a maternal system. So you have to have a father who's a Sayyid in order for you to qualify to receive the khums. But if the father is not a Sayyid, the mother is a Sayyidah, she can receive it because she's a Sayyidah. She comes from the Prophet's family, but not her children. So this law of the khums in the hadith of Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, it's passed down through paternal ancestry, not maternal ancestry. Yes?
When you say Sayyid, do you mean a Muhammad Sayyid? Or
No. We're not talking about a Muhammad Sayyid or a scholar. We're talking about anyone who comes from the line of Abdul Muttalib. This includes who? Who are the sons of Abdul Muttalib? Who had progeny in history? Abdullah, the father of the Prophet. So anyone who comes from the progeny of the Prophet, obviously. Abu Talib, the father of Imam Ali. Anyone who comes from the sons of Abu Talib, whether it's Imam Ali or Ja'far or Aqil, their descendants, they are qualified to receive the khums. Who else do we have? Abbas. Abbas also is the uncle of the Prophet. He comes from the line of Bani Hashim. So his descendants are also qualified to receive the khums. So Bani al-Abbas, by the way, they are qualified to receive the khums according to Islamic law, if they meet the requirements, of course, because we shall examine there are conditions. Who else, by the way? Which uncle of the Prophet the Quran cursed? Abu Lahab. Abu Lahab also comes from the Prophet's family. Now he was a kafir, so he's denied khums. But let's say Abu Lahab has children, progeny, who were believers. And they're poor, they do deserve the khums. So anyone who comes from the line of Hashim through Abdul Muttalib is qualified to receive the khums according to this hadith from Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam. Any questions on that? Now the next discussion that we'll have is the following. How do you establish that someone is a Sayyid? How do we verify that? How do you know this person belongs to this family? What are the Islamic ways to examine that? That's number one. Number two, the khums that you give to the Sayyid, does it have to be by the permission of your marja or no? The khums that you give to your marja, do you have to give it to your marja or you can spend it directly? That's something we'll examine. We'll look at the evidence that scholars have mentioned in binding their followers to give the khums to the marja, or at least seek permission from the marja, or spend it somewhere where the marja has authorized them to take khums. Is there any basis for this or no? Or you can directly spend the khums. I don't need to go through my marja's office to spend the khums. What is the evidence behind that? This is something we will examine in detail, inshallah. Any final quick questions before we break for salah?
If the zakat is 2.5%, how would God compensate 20%?
If the zakat is 2.5%,
Some items we discussed.
how does God compensate 20%? We addressed this last year. Very briefly, there are ways of addressing it. The khums is called 20%. It's called 20%. But after factoring in the expenses that you use during the year, at the end of the year, practically how much are you paying in khums? About 2 to 3%, not more. And we gave the example. Let's say you made $100,000. Are you paying 20% on that? Of course not. You factor in all of your spending. All of your spending. Your bills, your travels, vacations, food, lodging, whatever expenses. Let's say after all of that you're left with how much? $90,000. You spent 90, you're left with 10. At the end of the year you have 10 that you did not use. What's the khums of 10? 2,000. What's 2,000 out of 100,000? 2%. It's not more than the zakat really. So that's one way of examining it. Number two, remember, not all the khums is going to the Sayyids. 1/2 is going where? The Imam's share. Imam's share is spent on what? Projects. So in reality, from that 2%, 1% is going to the Sayyids. So what they're getting from the khums might be even less than what they were to get from zakat. Possibly.
But not all Sayyids get it, only the poor Sayyids, right?
We'll examine that, of course. Not any Sayyid. You know, a Sayyid who's wealthy is not eligible for khums. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد